When you're making YouTube content, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of things that can influence whether a viewer is going to watch for a very short period of time or a very long period of time. And it's so easy to get lost on where to get started and what to improve on every single week. So in this video, we're gonna go through a very long list of potential items you can improve on, and I'm gonna try to give a little bit of advice on each and every single one of these so that you know how to get started and what to think about when it comes down to making long-form content. Number one is storytelling. Now, storytelling, if you're going to do research, what I want you to look at is what elements are important to set up when you want to start a great story. And there are 4 things that you want in your storytelling. The first one is, what do you want to achieve? This is important for the viewer to know, because then they know what are we trying to get. Second thing is, why is it important for you? By understanding this one, they know the emotional value and how important this is to you, so they can also attach their own emotion to this. Then the third element that's very important to know is the obstacles. What's in the way of you getting to what you want? By understanding that one, we get a grasp of how interesting the story is going to be, because a lot of the interest in storytelling actually doesn't come from what we're going to get, but from how we're going to get there and what we had to overcome to get there. And the last thing is, often we think about what we want to get, but what about not getting that? What's so bad about it? What are the negative consequences? So, what do you want? Why do you want it? What are the obstacles? And what are the negative consequences? The second point is character development. Now, character development is often associated with movies, but you are a creator, you are a character, and the people around you in your videos are also characters. And one of the big things where people go wrong is they expect viewers to automatically care. A lot of times viewers don't care from the get-go. We have to build character care. And in order to do so, one big tip to give is not to only emotionally react to things and expect that the viewer understands this reaction, but to also explain the emotion behind each reaction. By doing this, both audiences that will feel with you and both audiences that don't feel but understand the emotion will be able to relate to your content. But there's also general character liking, very important, look into it as well. Number 3 that affects how long somebody watches is the video structure. And video structure can be in many ways. How you segment it, what comes first, what comes second, etc. And even how you build from one segment to another. This, as a quick tip, look into stair-stepping. Stair-stepping is the idea that each segment escalates, gets bigger, more important, more dangerous, etc. Number 4 is visual pacing. Visual pacing is very important too, because sometimes you could have a shot shown for 5 seconds when the scenes are a little bit slower and there's not much going on. But sometimes you want to cut faster in order to make things feel more chaotic. So let's say you're in the middle of conflict and something is going wrong. Cutting faster increases the intensity of that scene, and that works really good when there's naturally tension going on or conflict going on. So working with shot lengths and cutting speed and visual pacing is actually a great way to tell the viewer how to feel and how it tends to feel. Number 5 would be editing techniques. This is a very simple one, and you think, well, what editing techniques are you talking about? Well, I'm gonna refer to one. J-cuts and L-cuts. A lot of creators don't even know what they are. So look into ways you can transition between shots. Should the audio come in first? Or should you first show the visual of the other one? Because a lot of people, what they do is they hard cut. You know, you have your first scene and your second scene. What if the audio from your second scene comes in before the visuals? These are different ways of cutting. These are editing techniques that will help connect shots better together. Number 6 would be script writing. So script writing, a lot of people think, hey, I'm not scripting content. But script writing goes beyond just writing and scripting everything word by word. Script writing can be basic. What is going to happen in your video and how will this follow up? But let's, for the sake of this one, talk about sentences. One big piece of advice that I always give is to use action-driven sentences. This means that instead of saying, if I defeat this monster, I will get the trophy, you say, if I want this trophy, I have to defeat the monster. This is an action-driven sentence because it ends on the action that we have to perform in order to get the reward. And this makes it easier for viewers to feel like the sentence is moving us forward. Number 7 is simply improving video flow. What we think about when we think about video flow is, how do we transition from one scene to another? How many transition shots do we need? So let's say I'm in the store right now and I have to get to my house. Do we show part of the ride? Yes or no? And here's one trick when you are trying to convey the travel. Show us getting into the car, show one shot in the car, and show us arriving. What many people do is they show us getting into the car, then they show us in the car, and then suddenly we're already on the location. So typically we show the beginning, one shot in the middle, and the end. And this helps us flow throughout the segments a lot better. Number 8 would be call to action placements. When you're asking for a subscribe, a like, or even for somebody to go to your website if you're an educational channel, one of the big things you have to think about is when do you place this? Or maybe you have a brand deal. Do you place it early, later, etc.? So typically, this is the best piece of advice. Make sure there is enough value given, enough unique and high value given to the viewer before you place your call to action. This way, you're not asking something before you give. Very simple trick, but it's very often that people say, subscribe and like, let's get into the video. When it's like, give your value and then ask them for a subscribe and a like. Because also, when they've had value before, they're more likely to actually like and subscribe. Number 9 would be sound design. This one is a very complicated one. But if we think about music, if we think about sound effects, even if we think about Foley, which is, when somebody steps on a piece of wood, you want to hear the wood crack, you want to hear the footsteps and stuff, that's the Foley. All of that sound design, right now on YouTube, people are not paying a lot of attention to it. And I've been working on some gaming channels where every single time somebody takes a swing, rather than using in-game sounds, we use external sounds to really bring home those swings. The idea here is that whenever we use sound in a great way, we create a more immersive experience. So stop using the most basic track that you can find, or stop just changing by segment. Make sure that whenever something exciting is coming, the music escalates, that risers are included, and whenever a reveal happens, that there's a big wow effect. And this brings us actually back kind of on sound design as my 10th point. I want to go into music selection. This is related to sound design and how you use your sound, but what's unique about music selection is that music is meant to convey an emotion in entertainment content. Music should tell the viewer how they should feel during this moment. And if it doesn't do that and it's just some basic hip hop or rock, which a lot of creators use, then the viewer will not really be carried by the music, but only by what's happening. And this creates, yes, you may have an immersive experience, but not a true immersion to make people watch for a very long period of time. So think about your music selection. And if you want one extra trick here, this is the cool thing about music selection. You could have a singular track that people start to associate with certain type of moments in your content. Let's say every time a big unexpected moment happens, you have a certain track playing. Well, guess what? Use it in the future again and again, and people could start looking forward to this. That's music and feeling through association. Now, number 11, I'm gonna go back to the basics. Lighting. A lot of people don't think about how well lit their content is. I wanted you to take a look at this one. Look at my first video that I've uploaded on this channel, and now look at this video. I'm not gonna say my lighting is perfect, but do you see the difference? The difference isn't necessarily how I look. There is a slight shift in the camera that I'm using, but the main difference is the way that the lighting is used. Right now I use a backlight. There's actual panels in front of me. In my first video I had a singular panel, and then there was also the yellowish, etc. Lighting can do a lot to make people feel different. And again, a better look means that people will look at you as more credible. Very important in educational content. So think about your lighting, whether you're indoors or outdoors. 12, we're gonna go for camera angles. Now, I am not using a secondary camera angle, and I could probably benefit from that a lot, because what you're seeing is a singular angle and it's not that dynamic. I'm gonna be honest, I mainly film from one angle out of convenience, but I am currently looking into studio setups so I can have a secondary camera, so I can break up that frontal shot and create a more visually dynamic experience. A lot of creators, such as Alex and Molsey, use this one, and it creates a more dynamic watch experience, which is more enjoyable. But camera angles goes way beyond just using a B-roll side angle. It goes into, are you using a low angle, a high angle? Are you doing eye level? Or maybe you want to use a low shot. By using camera angles in different ways, you're going to be able to convey different type of stories. Number 13, let's think about B-roll for a second. We use B-roll, right? And maybe now I'm going to show you a shot of a horse. That's B-roll that I'm using. A horse that is moving, right? Not just an image. Well, B-roll can be good and B-roll can be bad. Imagine that right now I show you this shot of people being very excited. But unfortunately, it was taken from a stock website. And it looks very corporate because it's just the people in the office. Well, that's a big problem because this one slowly makes my content feel cheaper. This is where B-roll comes into play. I've worked with some creators who, whenever we talked about B-roll, I told them, hey, instead of looking up stock footage of a person brushing their teeth, why don't you brush your teeth and show that to the viewer? And this makes the content feel more integrated. It is higher production, but the viewer is going to notice this one, and it will affect how long people watch. Number 14 would be on-screen text. How many times have you looked at a content piece and every single word, like you see right now, is separate subtitles? It's very distracting. More of your attention goes toward the subtitles than they go to the person that you want the attention to go towards. So for that reason, there is subtitle rules. Look into subtitle. There's pages and pages. Look into the Netflix subtitle guidelines. And not only just the subtitles, it's also text that you show on screen. Maybe you have some subtitles that are going on like right now, and at the same time you're showing a description of what is a palm tree. You see there is text here, and now you have the subtitles. And how about we also add a timer that goes off from 10 to 1? You see, with a lot of text, it gets very distracting. So we have to start understanding is how we utilize our text. But again, on-screen text can look good and it can look bad. So that's also something we want to influence. Editor, show some text that looks really bad. And this one you can show the green to purple gradient and a white outline and a thin text. You see, this looks terrible. Now next 15, we got video length. Yes, if you want to make people watch for longer, you do want to think about your video length. Because when a person gets through the first segment, for example, and they see that, hey, there's only 2 minutes left, they may actually tune out because they believe that there's not gonna be too much value. And sometimes you can have an entire segment and there's still 8 minutes left. And the viewer knows, oh, the video isn't over, it's gonna escalate, stuff is gonna happen. And if you're the type of creator that can make something happen, then you may want to think, hey, maybe I can make those longer experiences. To get to a piece of advice here, I've worked with a lot of creators who made 12 to 14 minute content. But then what we realized is that when competitors make 20-minute content, viewers actually like that, and that content does well. And that got us thinking, does our audience like longer content? Will that also make them watch longer? So we started making longer content, and guess what? Our views weren't stuck at 100K views per video. At this point, that channel is already at 500 to 1 million views per video. It's insane. Just because we focused very much on video length improvements. Now for 16, I want to talk about something that a lot of people think is subjective. It's comedy. A lot of people think, oh, when you touch on comedy, and it's funny because sometimes I make videos about comedy and those actually don't perform that well because people feel like it's so subjective. But yes, comedy and the style of comedy heavily influences how long people watch. So here's what I'm gonna say. If comedy is the focus of your content, then you can have a niche type of comedy. But if you're an educational channel and you're starting to do these crazy out-of-the-box memes and they're quite cringe for a lot of people, now the comedy takes the center point, and since the comedy only appeals to a certain type of audience, now they need to be interested in the educational piece and the type of comedy that you're doing. That's the reason why I always say, if your focus isn't comedy, stick to very simple, mild jokes or sound effects, etc. in order to make people laugh. For example, I mean, in my case, you could just have a shine going through my head because I'm bald. That's a possibility. It's a simple effect. You know, it could be cringe, but since I don't address it that much, it's gonna be fine. But now if I'm doing the Hey Daniel meme, damn Daniel, I mean, that didn't look too well. That could be cringy, you know, so don't do that. Now next one for 17, I want to talk a little bit about authenticity. This goes around a lot, like your videos need to feel real, you need to be authentic. Well, it ain't true, because a lot of the people I work with who score extremely good, and some of them score over 100 million views on a single video, guess what? There's nothing authentic about it, because it's all scripted. So what does that really mean? Well, authenticity, let's replace that with how believable is what we're seeing. If you're doing scripted content, does it feel natural? Does it feel fluid? Does it feel like everything makes sense? If yes, then it will feel like authentic content. But the problem is that a lot of creators, they start to act like a YouTuber. They start having these what we call influencer tropes, which are typical things that YouTubers do, and then that doesn't feel authentic because you're not being yourself, or you're not being perceived as being yourself. So each character, whether it's scripted content or unscripted, you have to feel like this person is being themselves. If I start talking like this, you will notice that's not real. You see what I mean? It feels inauthentic. Simply because, guess what? It didn't feel natural enough. If you look at this video, did I feel authentic or not? Well, guess what? If I'm by myself in my room, I sit still. I don't talk that much, right? If I'm with my colleagues and friends, I'm very out there. And when I'm here, I talk like this. Authenticity also changes based on the situation. Number 18, intro length. It's something that a lot of people mess up. You know, a lot of people have 1-minute intros, 40-second, 50-second intros of just so much context. But guess what? Much of the context isn't necessary for the viewer, and it makes people tune out early. You'll lose like 20% of your audience so early on, when in reality you could have just cut out a few unessential context pieces. And by the way, this is just 18. There's like so many. Literally, these are my notes for this little video. I wrote down 90 of them. I don't even think I'm gonna go through this without making this a 2-hour thing. I'm just going through the important ones and I'm like, oh, this is really exciting. Like, this is an unscripted video. I'm just telling you, there's so much that matters. Why am I saying this? Because a lot of beginning creators, they think it's just about the intro. They think it's just, oh, you know what? If I make my intro this many seconds and if I say these 2 things, I'm gonna go viral. That's not true. 18, what I just showed you, is just the beginning. I'm gonna go for a bunch more. 19, motion graphics. Well, one trick that we learned for retention and making people watch for longer is showing animated explanations. We can use that. If I say an egg broke and a chicken came out, I can say this, but let's now see this with an animation. The egg broke and a chicken came out. Suddenly it's a lot more engaging because there's stuff going on and it's being visualized. Motion graphics are amazing. Earlier, I mentioned camera angles. Well, for 20, we're going to take camera framing. You see, like this is nicely framed. I got a little bit of space above my head. I can use my body, etc. But what if I'm like this? You know, now the framing is completely off and I'm looking at my side camera because I want to make sure that it looks bad. But yeah, like this doesn't look any good. So if I'm gonna sit like this and talk like this, and a lot of people, this is the extreme, but framing matters a lot. Let me sit back up. Number 21 would be zooms. You know, talking about camera, you know, we can frame, we can have angles. What about some zooms? What about some camera movement? Well, if I'm slowly zooming, then it feels like I'm about to reveal something to you. It adds extra emphasis. We should use zooms, but maybe we should zoom out as well. It could present us something. You know, there's multiple ways of using camera zoom. There's pans, there is tracking shots, etc. There's so much camera movement. It all depends on your situation. By the way, if you want a great resource, there's this channel called Studio Binder, and they have this playlist called Shot List. It's a really great one to get started with. Number 22, let's talk about slow motions. How many times have you seen people use slow motions? But what if you reveal something with a slow motion? You see how that slowness and that slow motion created that delayed gratification, that interest, curiosity of what's going to happen, what is going to be said. Well, using that one can actually increase satisfaction for a lot of moments. You're gonna reveal something with a slow motion, even if it's only for 1 or 2 seconds. Talking about satisfying things, slow motion can lead to satisfaction, but there's also specific psychological biases that we can utilize to make videos more exciting. For example, there is a psychological bias called peak end rule. Now this means that we're trying to create a very nice big ending and positive emotion as an ending. And then also throughout the experience, we want that positive emotion. I'm going to use an analogy for this one. But you know, when you go to IKEA, and this is where a lot of people use this example because it's a really great example, but you know that, oh, that great piece of furniture, that's your peak. It's like, wow, I found what I want. But at the end, you have the checkout experience. Oh my God, it was $2,000. Well, guess what? There's a coffee stand right after the checkout. Why is this? So that your last experience isn't the $2,000 bill, but it's a nice coffee or a smaller bill of, you know, I don't know how much coffees are at IKEA. It's all just to use peak end rule, which influences how you're gonna remember a content piece. So make your content end on that really nice, excited, positive emotion. But talking about the brain and how the brain works with biases, we can also go to neurotransmitters. This is some research me and my team have been doing, but we've been looking a lot into dopamine, noradrenaline and stuff. So one of the things that we looked into is that how does dopamine work and how can we use it? Well, when you made a promise, let's say the viewer is about to see something, do we have to instantly show it? Or can we stall? Can we tease them? Can we keep them on the edge of their seat before we reveal it? Well, guess what? If the viewer cares enough and is exciting enough, dopamine already starts to rise in anticipation of that big reward that they're going to have. They feel excited and motivated to wait to get the reward. And for YouTube content and even content on other platforms, this is fantastic because when we introduce something, we make people watch for longer, they get more and more excited, sometimes even more excited than when they actually get to see the reward. And this is good for algorithms. Now, next up, I'm going to highlight a little bit of a storytelling technique that people use to make people excited as well. It is foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is where you're starting to insert little moments that indicate something is going to happen in the future. A lot of people, they say, watch until the end to see this. But what if instead of explicitly stating this one, which is also, hey, so nothing else in the video is valuable? What if instead of all that, you're starting to slowly tease towards the big thing? Oh, something big is coming, something big is coming. And throughout your video, you build that hype. Or you do some subtle foreshadowing where you see a person is doing something and we don't address it, and then we see it again. There's different ways to do foreshadowing. Next is 26, reminders. A lot of times people in their intro, they promise some big goal, but they don't remind the viewer until 5 minutes. Or there's like a time restriction such as 24 hours and they don't remind the viewer of it. It just suddenly, oh, the time is up. Give regular reminders, because what it does is it creates a tense situation where the viewer has to pay extra attention and where it feels like, oh no, things could go wrong, we could run out of time, etc. But if we don't remind the viewer enough of the big goal of the video, the big promise or time reminders, the viewer will slowly forget about that. And if that's important to keep people paying attention in your video, then not having that could actually do a lot of harm and make people watch less long. Now, what's funny is that this list is so short actually compared to what you have to pay attention to. But I'm just trying to spitball, and I'm gonna do 3 more here. And if you really like this one, I could have a part 2. So let me know if you want a part 2. This is an experimental video format of doing extreme listicles. But let's go to the last 3 that I want to highlight in this specific video. Number 27 would be teasers. A lot of times I get asked, are teasers in the intro fine? Well, this is what I have to say about this. Teasers can be fine. Now, teasers are mainly used when you're unable to excite the viewer in a non-visual way or in a way where we can instantly deliver on what we're promising. So let's say in our first segment, we cannot really deliver on the big promise we make in our title. In that case, teasing towards that one visually in the intro could be a really great thing. But if we're able to already visualize some of the things or have those presented in the first segment, then teasers could not be that necessary, as they do take away time. But teasers overall are mainly focused on creating excitement, anticipation for what's about to come, and that can be a good thing. So it all depends on how you're making your content and what it's about, and how important it is that the viewer feels motivated for something exciting that's about to come, and can we tease it or not? So short answer, teasers are completely fine in your intros. Number 28, this is a very unique one, but how do you deal with it if you have text in front of you? Do you read it word by word? Do you summarize it? Do you show it on screen? Well, guess what? When you're reading things word by word, you're taking the pacing of those words, which typically isn't optimized for retention, and you're forcing the viewer to follow along at your pace, which often is damaging. So for that reason, what we typically try to do is summarize it unless it's very short text. So we try to optimize readable text for retention for the sake of the viewer being able to follow along at a nice pace. Reading has a lot of things to it. So look into reading and what makes for engaging text before you include a lot of text. These are little things, but they do matter. And at number 9, here I'm gonna go to some really crazy tip here. It is conditioning. Now, conditioning is a unique one where viewers learn to associate certain characters with boring scenes or certain characters with really good scenes. So for example, if I got a guy called Bob, and Bob is a jokester, and every single time Bob is on screen, he makes jokes. Well, guess what? In future content, every time Bob appears on screen, viewers will learn, oh, this is where we're going into a joking bit, and it could make people tune out even before they see the content itself. It's a very common problem, and I've had some creators where I had to say, look, we need to make Bob less involved in only funny moments, but we also need to have some progression moments where Bob is pushing the story forward more than anybody else, so the viewer is always guessing whether Bob is going to waste their time or not. Now, these were only 29. It's a very short list, and there's literally hundreds of little tricks. I mean, even in categories, you have hundreds of categories. There's thousands of tricks. There's so many things you can improve about content. And this is what I want you to know. If you want to make engaging content, every single week, take a small category. Think about something random, and optimize for that. Research into that. So if you want something to take away, let's say you want to go way beyond the 29 that I've mentioned, I'm going to tell you 5 categories to look into that I have no tips for right now because the video's over. Look into plot twists, right? How do you do them well? Look into how do you do callbacks to previous videos without wasting viewers' time. Look into shot length and how the brain processes shot lengths and how long it takes for us to process visual elements. Look into word choice and what type of language is easy to understand and how do you talk in a more engaging way. And look into the rule of 3, which arguably is one of the most important rules that will apply to any type of content at a certain time. Rule of 3. 1-1, third one breaks expectation. There you go. Hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to let me know and I will see you in the next one.